And then last we have, array of mediums for distributing this message. We've all talked about this from a social media standpoint, from online standpoint. The media world that we live in is changing, and how do we take advantage of some of those trends to really get our message across? So is it using social media platforms like Foursquare or apps to help create an opportunity to create a conversation or measure things that we're doing to change the behavior we're looking to change? And then finally, outreach. Again, we looked at this, we took some sort of lessons that we've learned over the time we've been together. How do we create that national conversation of outreach? So how do we get to the highest level of folks in the country, public health officials like the Surgeon General? How do we get to her and say, we really think this is important. Can you help us frame our message, and can you help us get an audience for this message? And in the same vein, while we're working sort of up here on the high level, national spokespeople we might be able to get to, or just even champions for us, how do we establish what we call a speaker circuit? So how do some of us who are in this group, in this room, go out and start speaking to the American Medical Association or the Pediatric Council? That, we need to, just as we bring them in, into our family, we should probably be reaching out to their family and create some speakers that can speak at some of those meetings. And last on the list, Aligned Federal Lands, HHS, the VA, the Department of Education. Again, I'm not in the same world as some of you. I call this alphabet soup, but y'all know what I'm talking about. How do we talk about with the government families and government agencies? How do we get to them to make sure that we're in alignment with what they're wanting to do and vice versa? We really need to create that messaging which is strong and much more of a unified voice instead of all these choir members sort of singing their own solos.
Before Erin goes on, one thing I want to add to number 3 is we had a really, I think it was Pete from Federal Highways, said, there's a difference between taking a survey document and moving it out to the market through a private medium. But what about every single federal land survey that we're putting out there, whether it's the Park Services surveys from the University of Idaho, whether it's INVM? Are there ways, whether it's the National Survey that Kendall Cordell does, is there a way for us to begin to plug and play into those existing government surveys a question about health and fitness and wellness? Because that's a way to easily kind of just add something into an existing structure. And then the other issue that came up from that, and we didn't put it on the slide, is that we measure what matters, and obviously OMB has to approve those surveys. So I mean, there's something to be said about putting it on the radar of OMB that you want it to be measured to motivate behavior changes and fund allocation. So those are brilliant things that came out of that issue on the research side. So please,
Hi folks. The last thing we wanted to present to you was actually maybe some of the most important materials, something that we imagine you as site managers would actually take from this meeting and try out. So I'm a site manager myself. I work on the Chugach National Forest up in Alaska, which is the northernmost, the westernmost, and the absolute best national forest of the entire nation. So as a site manager, we believe you've been, that's true. But a couple of things that we heard in these sessions was trying to come up with ways to integrate and collaborate. So identifying who your local public is, who your mental health professionals are, who your health professionals are, kind of begin a discussion. As managers, as sort of folks that are based in our communities, we know people that are Susan, maybe it's sit-ups and s'mores.
I think they're on something.
Or, you know, I mean, we could look at kind of the analogy that Gilbert gave to us too, is like, you know, the little toe. So maybe you dip your little toe into this pool, this new pool that we're not necessarily experienced in. And, you know, if it works out well, and things go well, maybe it's that little toe that helps the project run or something like that. So just looking at ways that you can dive right in and try and do this. And of course, the challenge to the folks in this room is we want to hear the successes and failures next year at Partnerships 2012. And this kind of community can help us figure out what works, what doesn't work, who are some of the connections that have paid off in the long run. And similarly for you site managers and partners that are back in your own communities, you know, looking at how you can share that out, talking about it with some of the partners that you work with already, you know, talking to the Fish and Wildlife Service in your community and saying, hey, we've got this initiative, we actually co-sponsored a health fair with a local hospital or something. So trying to figure out some different ways we can sort of get the message out. And doing that, talking outside of your agency, talking to some of your sister agencies, talking to your partners, and certainly internally as well, showing folks that, hey, this is somewhere that, you know, we have something to offer, we have some opportunities to give. And I think then, you know, sort of the larger effort is looking at ways to share it with the national partners, and certainly a group like this, I think is a way to do it. And I think I'll leave it there unless there's things Margaret wants to add.
No, I just want to, I think in summary, I think the biggest thing that I took away, we had a lot of good ideas. Again, we have several examples of ideas for things to try, came out of our group, and we'll document those. But it's this issue that this is new, this is different, and so, you know, you got to just start. You got to try. I remember last year at Partners, someone said make a commitment to try one thing, and that's what we want you to do. And mine was to talk to my pediatrician about getting outside, and you know, I put that pressure on myself. I went in and had the discussion with my pediatrician, and I said, you know, help me understand what you're going to try to do to get people outside. And she goes, you know, I'm not interested in getting them out to a forest. I just want to get my patients who are challenged with their weight outside and around their block, and the best way I know how to do that is to have them go out with someone they know. So I mean, that was me challenging myself to ask the question, but then being ready to leave and live with the result that she gave me. So I think what we really took away from this is we have an enormous amount to learn here. And we never forget that we've got these beautiful places for people to do it, but we've got to kind of, mouths need to close and ears need to open, and ingenuity needs to come out, and there's a lot we can do. We've got the place, we just need to be kind of, not patient, but determined in kind of our process and going forward through this. So. Oh yes, and we'd like to thank Heather and Frank, who kind of like helped us in this deal, and all the groups. We had great input, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share our thoughts tonight.
And Margaret did the PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's
Well, you know what came to my mind as they were talking about that, I can't even remember which pills are purple or yellow or green or blue, and you read these advertisements. All they show are these pretty places and say, you may need this pill, consult your physician. But at the bottom now it says, if you can't afford this medication, maybe AstraZeneca can help you. Well, you know, the thing we should do is tell the pharmaceutical manufacturers, maybe they don't have to pay for the pills. Maybe we take Jane Brody's advice, you know, take a hill, not a pill, kind of thing. So what we say is, hey, AstraZeneca, rather than subsidizing your pills to people who can't afford them, give them good advice. Go out and take a hike. Anyway. All right, and the... Okay, and our final presentation, I really sort of, I have to take my hat off to the moderators of the Team 3, because here we had not one, not two, not three, but 4 feds, and they completely extricated themselves from making the presentation at all. So anyway, Kevin, I don't know why you're standing there, because you know, you recruited the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and somebody was here from New York for the Park Service, and put them on the spot, and then all you guys, the national AGO guys, took a walk. So anyway, congratulations to you.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I do want to acknowledge Jim and
Can you
Eric
talk into the microphone?
on the Army Corps for helping facilitate the discussions. Much better? Very good. We had 2 breakout sessions. If you didn't get a chance to attend, we had a lot of discussion. It probably took about 12 or 13 pages of flipped up comments, great comments, and thanks everyone. And thanks to our co-conspirators who we recruited to help with the presentation. But I did want to go through a little bit and provide a framework. A little bit of this. Nope, not that direction. There we go. Just to sort of backtrack, and hopefully what I'm going to present here is consistent with what Bill Shafroth presented the other night. But I went back, just as a reminder, went through the AGO process over the last 9 months, just to refresh my memory in terms of the direction we were given in the presidential memorandum and some of the other points that came out of it. And really it was meant to reconnect Americans, especially children, to America's rivers, waterways, recreation areas, build on state, local, tribal priorities for conservation, land and water, and then use science-based management practices to restore and protect our lands and waters for future generations. And actually, this is very conservative. I think we're closer to maybe about 150,000 sets of comments that came in. Those were either submitted in person in the listening sessions, they were online, or I think there were about 50 organizations that actually submitted letters with comments representing their membership. And these are some of the major comments area that were identified. Engaging youth was a big issue. There was a separate team focused just on youth issues. Education programs and access was probably the most common comment that came in. Access to information, access to sites, accessibility, all that you can imagine. Landscape level conservation, historic preservation, employment and service learning. Healthy lifestyles was an issue that came up quite a bit. Improving management of our conservation state, and then protecting and renewing rivers and waterways. And so what we did is that we created 3 challenges for the team. And these were the 3. How can the federal government be a more effective partner in connecting people to the outdoors? What are the ideas about implementing the major AGO program areas? And are there untapped opportunities that we should be pursuing? And finally, continuing the conversation, how do we keep this discussion going that we started over the last 9 months? We don't want this to stop. And so we broke out, and we're going to break out each topic into some detail here, trying to summarize the comments that was captured today. So we're going to see the next part.
Good evening. I'm the one that got put on the spot. I'm Ernestine Robinson with the National Park Service in New York and New Jersey with Gateway National Recreation Area. And what I will talk about is how can the federal government be a more effective partner in connecting people to the outdoors. We stated that the first one is an internal agency assessment, and we will do that by identifying and reassessing the barriers, such as competition, contract, and versus cooperative agreement. Should we do competition contract, or should we do a cooperative agreement with ourselves and other federal agencies, as well as our private partners and other